Hi guys, I'm Branskipants and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, what's up? I am standing on the bridge to Goat Island. Goat Island, if you look it up, you're not going to find very much online, which is extremely frustrating. I am a West Virginia native who moved to North Carolina, and one of the first things that I did here was look up local legends and folklore. And one of the things that I kind of stumbled upon, but it wasn't really nearly as satisfying, was an island called Goat Island in the middle of the Haw River, in between Haw River and Burlington. And when you look it up, the only things you're really going to find is you're going to find pictures of this bridge. You're going to find a mention of a Sasquatch preacher named Chris, but not very much on him. And then you're going to find out about, apparently, a man used to live on this island that used to herd goats because they would keep goats on this island so they wouldn't run away. And this man apparently used to eat children and like kill them. So, yikes. And then apparently there's a pond that is never ending that like at nighttime this horseman guy comes out, and like maybe that's why the guy went crazy and decided to eat a bunch of kids. But also there is supposed to be a half goat, half demon man. Oh, because also the people didn't like that this man ate the children, so they all came after him and cut him in half and threw him in the pond. So that's all you can find about Goat Island. I've never heard of it. It seems like a kind of hidden local legend, and I really want to go explore this because the only thing you could find on YouTube was Relic Man. At the time when I found it, his name was Rob's Relics, but he likes to go around and explore old places. So that was why he went to Goat Island, and he does kind of touch base on mentioning that it's haunted, and I'll play the clip right here.
There used to be a story about this place saying if you went back to your vehicle, there'd be handprints of little children, or just handprints on the back of your car, like ashy handprints. And I never saw that. We did hear a bang one night, a real loud bang, and we all went running. It was about 4 of us. It was probably 97, 98, I remember, and oh man, that was enough to get us going and out of here.
So apparently, according to people that are locals, the island was used at one point to herd a bunch of goats. I guess because they were trapped there and they couldn't get off the island. I would assume they did it by boat, or maybe they made like stick bridges. I don't know. Because the bridge wasn't built until the 50s, and we'll get into that. I have went so far down the rabbit hole to find out if these stories could be true. But let's talk about the stories. Okay. According to the geocache, let's read that first. You must access this cache via the Haw River paddle trail. Accessing this cache over land would involve some serious trespassing. It is easy to get to the area via boat or canoe here, but caution should be exercised when accessing this small camouflage container with a log and swag. Otherworldly things may be watching. The following is adapted from the book Down Along the Haw, The History of the North Carolina River by Ann Cassabaum. Goat Island in Alamance County is the largest island in the Haw River. A little over a mile long, many years ago, a man lived there who raised goats. His other passion was torturing children. On his farm in the middle of the island was a bottomless pond that never went dry, even during the severest of droughts. On moonlit nights, you can see reflected in the pond horrible things, hellish things. It is said that demonic horsemen would rise from the pond and ride the island at night. Perhaps it was that drove the goat farmer to the horrible things he did. One day, the people in town had had enough. They hunted the man down, cut him in half, and threw what was left of him in the pond. Not long after, the stories began to circulate that the island was home to a half-man, half-goat monster. When the island was deserted, no one ever dared to live there again. To access this cache, you will have to set foot on Goat Island. When you do, be wary. The spirits there are very active and very dangerous. So now I really want to see what I can find out about Goat Island, because it just seems like that is such a tall tale, and there has to be evidence that somebody lived there on the island and used to eat children. Like, if this really happened, I need to be able to find news articles. I need to be able to find something. So the first place I go is the local library, the May Memorial Library in Alamance County. That is where Burlington is, and that is where if I'm going to find anything, that's got to be the place. Or at least that's what I assumed. So I did go, and I looked on the bookshelves and I didn't really find anything. But then, asking around, there's like a local history section in the library, so I went in there. And this lady was very helpful. She handed me a big giant manila envelope full of articles that pertain to Goat Island. Like, they have that there. Like, if you need to know anything, just go to your freaking library. It's so cool. But also, I was able to, like, get on the little, I don't know what it's called, the computer thing, where you can go through and look at, like, old little clippings, and then you can print off something. Like, I felt like an investigative reporter, and it was pretty cool. So, anyways, also, Anne Casaubon's book, the Haw River book, was in the library because I couldn't find it like on the shelves, and it said it was there, but it was only as a reference in like the local history section. So I went and she showed it to me, and we're gonna go ahead, and I have it on my computer. I'll put it on the screen so you can see it, but it's like page 65 in her book, and this is what she has to say about it. And this is like the only detailed written anything that I can even find about the ghost stories in Goat River. So this is basically what we saw on the geocache, but a little more detailed. So here we go. Haw River Stories, Goat Island. Goat Island waits in the river at the end of Sellers Mill Road. Generations forded here, some taking their flour to be ground at the mill, river left. The island is now a trip to the dark side. If you are not brave enough to canoe to Goat Island at night, summon the courage to walk the rusty graded bridge the Haw tears below on a February day that smells of sleet. Goat Island is the creepiest place on the Haw. A stripped abandoned car and a know anything sign put me in the mood. Why? What's happened here? Listen to what I have heard. A man lived here who raised goats and tortured children. He had been cut in half at night and became a goat man. If you doubt me, you can find on the island the oven where the kids were cooked. It's near the remains of a house with bullet holes fired by drug dealers and mafia men. After Hurricane Floyd flooded it, there was a terrible smell. Some said rotten fish. Others knew different. A pond here never goes dry, but the reason is too horrible to tell. Some have seen a black horseman, one of Satan's. Amanda and her husband are my serendipitous guides and source. She grew up here. Undaunted by stories to keep her away, Amanda played Ouija board at night and hid playing hooky days, sometimes near a school bus. So old the steering wheel is in the center. Listen, be open. You will hear the spirits, Amanda speaks. Together the three of us explore the island past grim and grayed beech. Holly, ironwood, oak, maple, river birch, cedar. Sycamores look naked, and myrtle and ivy, those sweet plants of domestication, sinister. A dog howls mournfully as we escape back over the graded bridge. Don't look down, Amanda warns, or you will feel like you are floating away. Is it any wonder a woman committed suicide here, driving off into the Haw near the bridge? Amanda asked. Safely on Sellers Road Extension, I can almost imagine a beautiful island pasture of goats. But today, looking past the stony tree bark at Sky and River, I see a goat island that belongs to the demon world. And that's it. That's the only thing that you can find talking about the spirits. Except, I did find an article of a man talking about a Bigfoot named Chris. That's the other supernatural thing. And, if I'm being honest, it depends on when you catch me. If you catch me after I've read a bunch of missing 411 stories, I'm really like, maybe there are Bigfoot, you know. It really gets me, and I'm more inclined to think maybe Bigfoot's real. But then sometimes I'm like, I don't know, you know. But like, Chris is a local Bigfoot, and we will get into him. But I'm going to read to you the article that I found in the manila envelope at the library. Okay, this I have to read from paper because she handed it to me as a newspaper clipping from 1987, and then she got me the little, I don't even know what it's called. It's like a roll of like the paper, and then you put it on a machine, and then you can print out what you want. So that's what I did here. So we're going to read the little section about Bigfoot. and this was written in 1987. From the days when Indians scurried along the riverbanks and the small islands of the Haw River, tales of mythical creatures have also abounded. One of the more modern fables is the tale of Mighty Chris Chris, about a monster who wanders around an island in the river. Goat Island is where people used to keep goats so they wouldn't run away, says Harry Silcox, who can see the tail end of the island from his property. Silcox lives on part of the Haw River that sweeps past Burlington, just north of the town of Haw River. You want to know about Chris Chris? Silcox asked. Well, he's just a friendly monster that lives there on the island. He's kind of big, about 7 or 8 feet tall, ugly, hairy, ape-like. Silcox says he learned of Chris Chris years ago when he and his wife would hear children walking around the banks of the river, talking about a monster that wandered around the island. It was always at nighttime, he says. The kids would go up and down the riverbank looking for him. At night, the trees will creak or fall, and sometimes you will hear a growl in the woods, he says. I tell the kids it's just Chris Chris wandering around Goat Island. Silcox says Chris Chris leaves footprints in the riverbanks about a foot long. The monster has 6 toes, all of which are about the same length. He'd make a good field goal kicker, Silcox says with a chuckle. Silcox has taken it upon himself to perpetuate the story. Once he responded to a letter in the newspaper from someone who questioned Chris Chris's existence. And yes, Virginia, there really is a Santa Claus-like type letter. I responded by saying that Chris Chris certainly does exist. So that was in the paper in 1987. And I also had reached out to a man who works for the Alamance Parks and Recreation, and I asked if he had any information, and he did tell me this about Chris Chris. The Chris Chris legend is a local Bigfoot story. The large, ape-like, 6-toed creature was reportedly created by exposure to radiation from the old Western electric plant on Graham Hopedale Road. During the mid-20th century, that plant was used to manufacture military weaponry, which gave rise to the story that I don't think there was actually any nuclear materials there. The legend has extended because of sightings from time to time, mostly centered around Goat Island. I don't think there is much more to the story than that. It's kind of got some Mothman-esque vibes, because I come from West Virginia, and one of the theories is that the Mothman was actually a crane. When you go out to the TNT area, you will see a lot of large cranes, and some people think that maybe there was some exposure to like weapons and like some chemical radiation type thing that maybe made a crane get mutated, and then that's how you got Mothman. Or it could have just been a crane in general, is what people say. But that was the kind of vibe that I got from that. But I always am thinking of Mothman because, I'm biased. Anyways, so I've now went to the library, and I actually have found a source that talks about the ghost, and it talks about Chris Chris. So the next thing we have to do is we have to actually go to the island, and I did do that. And I actually found a fellow there that was willing to be interviewed, so enjoy. Well, we are walking to Goat Island, and we just ran into Scott right by the bridge, and I asked him if he knows any details about Goat Island because it's really hard to find. So, would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, we've heard a bunch of different stories. A lot of the kids that come down here said it's half man, half goat lives over there, which we know that's not true. But we've looked some stuff up online. We know there was a camp there at one time, but we found that a counselor out there that had something to do with goats killed a lot of kids back in the 20s and 30s, like a lot of them. I don't know a count, but this is what I've been told from different people down here.
In a book I had seen that apparently there was a man that would eat children, and there's supposed to be an oven remains.
And it's still over there if you go to the left. Yeah.
The left.
The foundation and all that. It's kind of creepy.
Did you find the pond?
Yes, as soon as you cross the bridge right there, it's right there to the left. You can see it plain as day. It's almost like quicksand.
See, it says it's a bottomless pond, and a horseman comes out of it at like nighttime, and it'll get you.
And that's why when we come down here in camp, we stay on this side, not this side.
Yeah. Okay, well, have you heard about Chris Chris?
No.
Chris Chris is a Sasquatch creature that allegedly lives on that island, and sometimes you can find
And
his
I don't even want to say, I
footprints.
just seen on that end over there
Bigfoot?
something down on the end or whatever. And I thought it was a guy hunting, but it wasn't.
Nuh-uh, you may have
Just
seen
now.
Chris.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, he's apparently nice and he has 6 toes. So, well, I guess we're gonna go and see if we can find Chris. I can't believe you probably just saw Chris. So after we interviewed Scott, we decided to go ahead and walk across the bridge, and he kind of gave us a tour of the area because he'd been there a lot. And one of the first things we noticed was there was this really weird bar on the bridge that was twisted. How did it get twisted? I don't know. I mean, can a human really twist metal like that? I guess maybe with the proper tool. But was it Chris? I don't know. Anyways, we walked across the bridge and we got to the island. Now, when you get to the island, you have several landmarks on there. There is allegedly a bus. Now, I didn't see the bus because when I was walking around, my battery got pretty low and I didn't want to be stuck on the island. And I also had to get home to, like, go get my kids off the school bus. So I didn't want to get, like, trapped without knowing what time it was on this island and then have a big old fiasco. So I missed the bus. I might go back to see if I can see it, but that landmark was not found. Now, right as you cross the bridge, there is a pond. Now, it's no longer a pond. It is now just like a big circle that looks like it maybe was a pond at one time, but it's completely dry. But according to the legend, it never ran dry even during a drought. So we totally debunked that. Didn't even have to really try. It's just a big circle that you can stand on. There is also a foundation of a house. Now, people love to say that this is the house that the man lived in that used to eat the children, and there's an oven over there that the children were cooked in. But that is also debunked, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There is also an abandoned car that I assume somebody drove over the bridge and left over there, and it is definitely shot up. People like to take their guns out there and shoot things as target practice or what, I don't know. But there is a car that is completely rusted, falling apart with bullet holes in it. And that's pretty much it. So with that, we saw pretty much everything that there was to see. There was some interesting things where it looked like vines had been tied together. Why are they tied together? I mean, that could be anyone's guess. People have been going to this island and camping for a long time. If you're homeless, it would be a great place to kind of hide and chill out and camp. There's a lot of camp circles and little campfires about. It's just a hot spot for people. It seems like if you go there at any time, you're going to find someone. So if you ever find your way in Burlington, North Carolina and want to go explore Goat Island, don't go alone, because not everyone may be a nice person is there. And there could be a Chris walking around. So, you know, take that with whatever you want. Just don't go alone. Anyways, the foundation, this house. People like to say that this belongs to the man that used to eat children, but it doesn't. I contacted the Alamance Historical Museum, and I talked to a lady, and this is what she told me.
1956, and that is when the property went on the market again. It was purchased by D.M. Hawkins, and his name was Doc Martin Dude Hawkins, and his wife was Anna Deskins Hawkins, and she ran Anna's beauty shop in the 1950s.
Do you know anything about any of the ghost stories on Goat Island by chance?
I've heard them, and I think they're all rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are too, but I'm trying to kind of pinpoint where they started, or like, I don't know. I've heard about that there is apparently a horseman that comes out of the pond, and that there was a man that used to, like, kill and eat children, apparently, and then that the town ripped him in half and threw him in the pond.
I've heard one where he killed children and ate them, and I've heard another one where he tortured children. Yeah, I had one guy here a few years back. He was just all about Goat Island, and there was an awful fella there that was a murderer, and the people got together and lynched him and different crap like that. And I'm like, no, if there was a lynching, there would have been an article in the paper somewhere.
Okay, so the museum lady, she obviously doesn't believe in any of the ghost stories, but she's heard them. So, it's been around a little bit. I'm thinking that these stories probably started in like the 80s or 90s whenever the island was more deserted, because she shed light on the fact that the house was built in the 50s by a man named Dude Hawkins and his wife Ina Hawkins. So we now know that this was on a goat farmer, and that this house, that there was no house on this island up until that point. Now, that's what I wanted to know. It's like if somebody lived there, they would have had to have lived in a building, and the first building wasn't built there until the 50s. Then when did this man that ate children ever live there? So I was told to contact a man named Herman Johnson. Herman Johnson is a man that when he was a teenager, actually I think he was 22, he built a raft, and with his friends, he started in Greensboro, or wherever the Haw River starts, and he rafted down the whole Haw River all the way down to Carolina Beach. And it's a big feat, and he wrote a book on it, and I'll have it linked below. But I was told to get in touch with this man and to see what he has to say, because if anyone knows the Haw River, it's Herman Johnson. So I called him, and he was gracious enough to speak with me, and we're going to see what he has to say about Goat Island, and maybe on like who lived there before the Hawkins. Okay, well, do you know any of the scary legends that people talk about Goat Island?
Well, since time begun, the island sat there in the river, and nobody, it was uninhabited. That's about all there was to it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then in, I guess somewhere along about around 1957, 1958, mid-50s, they say mid-50s, there's a fella bought that island over there, and his name was, I don't know what his name was, what his true first name was, but everybody called him Dude Hawkins, so I'm sure he was a Hawkins, but I'm not sure what his first name was, other than Dude. And he went over and built a house on that island, and built a bridge and built a house over there. And he lived in that house until he passed away, and then I guess his wife lived there until she moved out. And then sometime in I believe it was in the 80s, the house burned, and I don't guess they could get over on the island to effectively fight the fire, and so the house was pretty well destroyed over there. In other words, there wasn't anything left but foundations, and that's the only people that I ever knew that tried to live on that island over there. Probably in flood times, the island is probably at least 80% underwater, and with only just where the old house stood, that's about the only thing that's above water. And in two or three real heavy floods, the whole island has been underwater. The island is at one point maybe 150 to 200 yards wide, and about a mile long. That's about it, you know. Now, I played on it when I was young. We ran up and down and played on it when we was children, because, like I say, my granddaddy's farm was right on the east bank of the river, and we had a boat on the river, and we'd row over to the island and run up and down the island and mess around. When that was before the Hawkins ever bought the property. Now, who owned it before the Hawkins, I have no idea, but there was no structures on the island before Mr. Hawkins would ever build a house on it.
Did you personally know Dude Hawkins?
Yes, I did. I did know Mr. Hawkins.
Did,
Not very well, but I met him and I knew him. I mean, you know, I was young, and he was Mr. Hawkins to me.
oh, okay.
And him and his wife, and yes, I did meet him, and I did work over there, helping build that bridge when I was probably 15 years old, maybe 16, and what he did to build the bridge over there, he bought an old trestle bridge from the state, which is still over there, by the way. And then he went out to the bedrock in the river, and what he did was he put barrels in and filled the barrels up with concrete to make columns to hold the bridge up. And me and a buddy or two of mine went over there for about 2 or 3 days and mixed concrete and rolled it out, dumped it in those casings that hold the bridge up out there. And he paid us $1 an hour when we was doing that work.
So Herman basically proved to us that there was nobody on the island before the Hawkins. He helped build the bridge, which is crazy. Apparently, Dude Hawkins bought a bridge or 2 bridges from the state and put them together, and it's just held up with barrels with cement. I walked across that. But you know, it's literally withstood the test of time. So, yes, Herman basically confirms that he used to play on the island before anyone ever lived there. There was no other structures, and as far as he knew, nobody else had lived there. So I thought maybe it's worth a shot to reach out to maybe a Hawkins descendant. I found some on Facebook, and I met a fellow named James Hawkins, and he's about the same age as Herman. They're both in their 80s. And James actually was very fascinating to talk to. He dabbles in genealogy, and so he has traced his family back all the way to the 1200s. But he told me a lot of history about Goat Island, and let's hear what he has to say as well. I started out, I went to explore Goat Island, and because I had kind of heard a tiny bit about some of the scary stories that supposedly happened there. And so I wanted to go explore it because nobody really ever has. But then I was trying to track down people that maybe could share the scary stories that they heard growing up. And I tried to trace down where they originated from. But it sounds like somebody just had to have made them up, because I believe from everything I've gathered from all the people I've spoke with, Doc and Ina Hawkins were the only people to have lived over there, and so there shouldn't have been anyone else on the island before them.
Well, now I can tell you a little bit of history about how it was purchased, about when, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Okay, all right, it was my Uncle Dude. In fact, my dad helped him build a home. My dad was he actually had some dealings with Elon College. It was college then. When he got out of World War II, he got with Frances Dawson. She was a professor at Elon, and she got him to operate a school teaching veterans how to build homes.
Okay.
And then he helped Dude build that house, his house out there. And the house was built, in the early 50s.
Okay. That sounds adds up with everything that I had put together.
The house, Uncle Dude got 2 big old 2-story brick homes with handmade brick on.
Okay.
He was a fairly wealthy man. That was just his summer home. In the wintertime, he owned lots of property in Florida, and he'd go down there in the wintertime. But anyway, he bought 2 big 2-story brick homes, homemade brick, and he tried to hire me and my brother to knock the mortar off the brick Well, I didn't make any money. I wasn't but like 10 years old.
Yeah.
I couldn't do very much. I didn't even only make 15 cents. But anyway, he hired somebody, elderly people, or wasn't little kids. He hired somebody to knock all the mortar off of them. But then he also where he bought the 2-story brick homes, they had a barn out there. So he took the beams out of that barn, some big old huge wood beams, and that's what he used to build to make the wood joist, the exposed wood joist in the ceiling of that home. And over the island's about a mile long, approximately. The people that owned the land before Dude was Crutchfields.
Crustfields. They owned the island before Dude did? Okay.
I remember camping out with the Boy Scouts at that house that Dude bought. This is back in the early 50s also. The Boy Scouts we camped out there. And I never heard anything about ghosts, but we did camp out there.
All right. Well, after talking to Herman Johnson and James Hawkins, who were both around during the time that the Hawkins built their home on the island and were there when the bridge was built, I think it's safe to say that nobody lived on this island before the Hawkins did. So I think we're going to have to say that there's no truth to any of these stories. I think what we have here is a product of the imagination of people from the 80s and the 90s. Like, if you can imagine, you live in this little subdivision and you go outside and play because you don't have the internet, and you have an island in the middle of the river, basically in your backyard, with a really cool rusty bridge that just leads to the island, and there's a burnt down house, abandoned cars, abandoned buses, and a pond, and people camp there, and you have campfires, and it's just this massive playground. Of course you're going to make up stories because you have to scare each other. That's what we did. We had woodland areas where I lived, and we would always, all day, be playing in those little trees, and we would just make up stories and try to scare the crap out of each other. And that's what we did. And I imagine that it's the same thing that is happening here in Burlington. But now, nobody goes outside and plays because everybody has devices, and a lot of people don't even know that Goat Island is there. So the stories are fading. Not as many people know. But I feel like that is what we have here. This is just children spreading rumors and living it up and making up stories, having a good time while they're camping. So I really hate that I debunked it all because I love a good ghost story, and I was really looking forward to going and looking for some creepy stuff. But I did not debunk Chris. So if anyone's down to go hunt for Chris, let me know. Maybe we can do that. But I think I'm done here. I think I am done. I have been researching so much and talking to so many people and going to museums and going to libraries, and I need something else to do. So I'm gonna go, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, consider subscribing and maybe ring the bell, because that helps. If I upload something else, it'll let you know. And if you like this, give it a thumbs up, because that'll please the algorithm gods, and we always need to please the algorithm gods. So I'll catch you next time. Peace.